Today's scripture comes from the Gospel according to John. It's part of the farewell discourses of Jesus, words that he shared with the disciples about how to remember him and how to keep his memory alive after he was gone. Hear these words from the Gospel of John, chapter 14, beginning with verse 23. Jesus answered, "Those who love me will be true to my word, and Abba God will love them, and we will come to them and make our dwelling place with them. Those who don't love me don't keep my words. Yet the message you hear is not mine. It comes from Abba God who sent me. This much I have said to you while still with you. But the Paraclete, the Holy Spirit whom Abba God will send in my name, will instruct you in everything, and she will remind you of all that I told you. Peace I leave with you. My peace I give to you. But the kind of peace I give to you is not like the world's peace. Don't let your hearts be distressed. Don't be fearful. You have heard me say, I am going away, but I will return. If you really loved me, you would rejoice because I am going to Abba God, for Abba is greater than I. I tell you this now before it happens, so that when it happens, you will believe." Here ends the reading. These are heavenly words for earthly people. Amen. Friends, today's message comes to us in the form of many stories. Just as Tanya remembered her babushka, so too we have ways to keep memories alive. Stories today are shared by members and friends who answered the call to share with us a story or memory of a loved one that helps keep that loved one alive in and through them. In this Easter season, we've been looking for signs of life, signs of the risen Christ. And on this Memorial Day weekend, even though it may seem counterintuitive, we acknowledge that one of the places we find new life is by honoring our memories, returning to the core values, nurturing the seeds planted in us by the people we love, who modeled a life well lived and revealed to us glimpses of the divine. Today, we honor the vulnerable and brave sharing of each of our storytellers and thank them for their gift of remembering. After each sharing, as a way of acknowledging the story and gift shared and received, we will have a call of response. I'll say, "Holy wisdom, holy word," and your response is, "Thanks be to God." Let's try that. Holy wisdom, holy word.
Thanks be to God.
Let's try. Oh, good. Let's try it again. Holy wisdom, holy word.
Thanks be to God.
Very good. And now for our storytellers. I first introduce John Gracie.
Thank you, Pat. For me, any gesture of hospitality is an exercise in memory. Anytime I welcome a guest or prepare a meal for friends, I am honoring the memory of my parents. Throughout their long life together, Walter and Ruth Kreising were outstanding hosts. In their first days as a couple, as Dad began his career at the U.S. Steel South Works, they would host friends from work at their little ranch home in Calumet City. Mom steadied tipsy guests for the trip home with Heidelberg soup, a hearty meat and potato soup that some of our new members have experienced recently. As I grew up, Thanksgiving dinners were the social climax of our year. Now living on Chicago's Northwest Side, we would open our doors to extended family from Wisconsin, St. Louis, the Upper Peninsula, Seattle. Our substantial dining room table acquired one leaf, then two. And as the family grew and spread, we added rented folding tables and chairs. The table extended into the living room, hung left, finally culminating in 45 guests with a small card table set on the first landing up the stairs for us kids. Mom and Dad cast a wide net, and the guest list was not limited to family. One year brought Eduardo, a business colleague from Ecuador who was stranded in Chicago for the holiday. Another year brought us a Greek sailor cousin Marcia had just met. I never did get his name, but we entertained him so thoroughly that he missed a ship, and we had to drive him up to Manitowoc later in the week. You don't get that many people without a lot of variations in life circumstances. Mom and Dad never varied, though, welcoming all and visiting all. They stayed in touch with both sides in every divorce, exchanged cards with every nephew or niece that left the extended family circle, regardless of where life dropped them. Our last social call came during COVID when Mom welcomed my daughter and her girlfriend for a short, lovely visit in the garden of her senior apartment in Aurora. Years passed and the faces around the table have changed. Dad left us in 2018, Mom in 2023. The table is now divided, one still in the Chicago metro and a second out in Indiana. Tane, Maeve, and I rotate between the two. But wherever we sit, though, the standard is endured. Everyone is welcome, and we all sit together.
Holy wisdom, holy word.
Thanks be to God.
And now we'll hear from Carla Briggs.
Well, there's something that most of you don't know about me, but I grew up as an Air Force brat. My mother married my stepfather when I was in the 5th grade, and not long after that, we started out, he was being transferred to Maine, and so we started out pulling a trailer, a house trailer, from Texas to Maine. That's quite an adventure and another story. But along the way, he took us to Illinois to meet with his family, and he was the youngest of 4 in the family, and he was the only boy. So he was pretty spoiled, and everybody always rushed home when Bill came home so that they could see him. And we met aunts and uncles and cousins and our new grandmother, who was the finest woman that ever lived. They were all Christians. They went to the Christian church in town. We had big family dinners, and we just had a wonderful summer spending our time there with them before we moved on to Maine. My grandmother was the most special person on earth, and as I grew up later on in life, she was the one person I wanted at my wedding, and she was always there for me. My mom and I loved her so much that when my stepdad and my husband both went overseas during the Vietnam War, Mom and I moved in with my grandmother and my great aunt, who she took care of. We had a wonderful year of playing bridge or playing cards, and we went to church. We listened to lots of gospel music because my grandmother was really into gospel music. She knew all the singers, and she could tell us who could sing which song were the best. And so we had a really, really good time. But later on, she downsized, and she moved into a trailer on the property across from the big house, and other family members took the big house. Ken and I visited her one time in her trailer, and her living room was filled with gospel music, tapes and records, and she just had a plethora of music. So she continued that love of gospel music and on into her probably late 80s. The story is that she and my Aunt Marcy would cook all week, and then Aunt Marcy would drive from Indianapolis to Illinois, where my grandmother lived, and they would load up her big Lincoln Continental and fill up the back end of it with cakes and pies and cookies and head off to Gospel Fest. Now, I don't know if you had Gospel Fests around here back in the 70s and 80s, but gospel music was really big up there, and they would have these Gospel Fests where they would be in a church a lot of times. Sometimes they were at like the county fairs and things, but they would have big meals afterwards, and my grandmother would follow one gospel group for a while, and then she'd follow another one, and they just had a great time. My Aunt Marcy died last week, And she was 93 when she died. And up until 2 years ago, she was still working with a gospel group to schedule their appointments around the town. So the gospel group that she was following came and sang at her funeral. They sang several songs, and then they told little stories about her in her Lincoln Continental. And they told stories about little things that she did and how she helped them. And one time she decided they all needed new shirts, and so she bought them all new shirts for some reason. But the thing that it did was that it gave me the lessons that I needed to know about gospel music and how important it would be in my life as time went on. So if you come to church some Sunday morning and you hear music blaring from somebody's car, it's probably me listening to gospel music and thinking about my grandmother.
Holy wisdom, holy word.
Thanks be to God.
Our next storyteller, David Yurden.
My mother was an accomplished oil painter. This is one painting that hangs in our home right now. The studio she set up in the 1960s was in our last family home, and of all places, our unfinished basement. That's where my father also had his small workshop. And I wonder how they negotiated using that space. I mean, power tools can be very noisy. So Natalie moved from Connecticut to Florida in 1976 with her sister Gertrude. Her studio was in their spare bedroom. Her preferred subject was always portrait and figure painting. I'll never forget the story she shared about painting a woman's figure, failing to notice that the image had 6 digits on her right hand until after it was framed and hung. Of course, she corrected it, and that painting hangs in my sister's home today. So in the 1990s, I began to pursue painting seriously. I started with watercolor classes taught by Mary Muller and painted off and on for 20 years, balancing family, marriage, career. It was a challenge to stick with it. Then in 2018, I took a pastel class at the Des Moines Arts Center from Diane Kunstler and fell in love with the medium. As most of you know, landscape and waterscape are my favorite subjects. Occasionally, I will try a cityscape or a still life. Sorry, Mom, but portraits and figures are not my thing. During a critique session, Diane said to us, "Always count the fingers and toes." I immediately laughed and thought of Mom's story. I'm certain of my mother's presence with me at times when I paint. Occasionally I will say, "What do you think of that, Mom?" She also dabbled in pastels, and I have a few of her pastel pieces in my inventory. Last fall, I took my first oil painting class from Diane. The painting of poppies out in the narthex is my favorite of the 10 or so oil paintings I have completed. I've yet to feel confident with oil, but I continue to practice it off and on. Curiously, my favorite brush is one of several I inherited from my mother. My mother died in 2014 at age 91. I have a small pouch containing some of her cremains. Whenever I create a painting for family members, I blend just a pinch of her cremains into the painting. And that's another way my mom, the artist, lives on through me, the artist.
Holy wisdom, holy word. Next, Diane Dornberg.
September 6th, 1990. My dad died just 2 weeks short of his 76th birthday. My mom wasn't really able to take care of herself, living alone out in the country, and she went to live in the nursing home in the town where she was born. As she slowly lost her health and her memory, she was surrounded by the familiar faces of the people she grew up with, went to school with, did politics with, played cards with. The end of the summer in 2001, my mom was in hospice care. All the legal requirements had been met, and the paperwork was done for me to adopt my daughter. She had lived with me and her siblings for 5 years, and we were all ready to make it official. The nursing home staff thought Mom had days, not weeks or months, left to live. She wouldn't know the difference, but it was important to me that the adoption of her granddaughter be done while she was still alive. The judge for the adoption had followed our family from the beginning. She was going to be gone most of September. The only day she had available was September 6th, the anniversary of my dad's death. I had mixed feelings about that day being adoption day, but I heard my dad's voice inside my head saying, "Don't let that day be a sad day. Make it be a happy day. Adopt her, celebrate her adoption, and make it a happy day." So that's what we did. The judge's court attendant still remembers the flood of emotions that we all experienced: the relief, the satisfaction, the joy and completion of our family. And then, the next week, the whole world came to a screeching halt as planes crashed and towers fell on 9/11. While we were trying to process what was happening in the world, the nursing home called and said it was time for us to come. And as we drove on the deserted freeway, under eerily quiet skies, we got the call that Mom had died, with her sister-in-law and a close friend holding her hands as she departed this world. Mom would be buried next to Dad in Wildwood Cemetery, about a mile from where she was born. But I had another picture in my head. I could see my dad looking at the 9/11 world, coming to get Mom out of here and dancing off with her to someplace that he knew, and we did not. Those September days are still times of sadness and celebration. One part of the family ending, another beginning. Grateful for my mom, my dad, my daughter. Sad that we didn't all have time to be a family together. But all of them forever in my heart. And tomorrow, my daughter Sammy turns 35.
Holy wisdom, holy word. Thanks be to God. And now, Mark Manier.
My wife, Carla, and I are grateful to have the opportunity to worship with you folks for the past few months. We have appreciated the warmth of your welcome and the clarity and commitment that you have to do justice and love mercy and walk humbly. I'm here this morning to share Charlene's story. Not just because of my admiration and affection for her, but because she asked me to. She wanted me to share her story with whomever and wherever and whenever it might be redemptive. Thus, here today. Charlene was a pioneer. I don't know if you folks have had a pioneer in your life. I had one. My grandmother was pioneer stock. Her family moved to South Dakota in the late 19th century, where they broke prairie sod next to the Platte River to farm. By the time and she was just a toddler at the time, so by the time she was 14, she'd lost her mother, her paternal grandmother who had lived with them, and her father as she nursed him at the end of his life when she was 14, off to become a nanny and live her life. Pioneering can be harsh work, such as it was for Charlene. Charlene was born in 1915 as Charles. And as she would tell the story, by the time she was 5 or 6, she knew she had this deep feeling within her that she was a little girl inside a little boy's body. The 1920s and the 1930s were not a welcoming place. Even though this awareness stayed strong within her, she never expressed it. She enlisted in the Army in 1939 and served for 6 years through the entirety of World War II. Her life in harm's way on many occasions. She stormed the beach at Normandy on D-Day, honorably discharged in 1945 and returned home. And maybe you've had this experience, but if you've had an encounter with the finitude of life or the fragility or fellow soldiers that she lost, for whatever reason, there was a shift in Charlene. And she decided that the pain of not living her authentic life was stronger than the fear of what others might think. So she lived her life, expressed herself as a woman in dress and makeup and mannerisms. In the late 1940s and 1950s, she paid a price for it. She was arrested on several occasions, spent time in jail, and on more than one occasion was committed to mental institutions. Just think of the irony of that and the poignancy. She fights fascism in Europe to defend freedom and comes home and her own personal freedoms are not honored. That still grips me every time I think of that. So she found her way through the next few decades, and then she and I would have a rendezvous in the late 1990s when she came to the Iowa Veterans Home, a place that Ken knows a little bit about, that's where I crossed paths with Ken and his efforts and the concerns of the Veterans Home. She was in her 80s, needed some care. She wasn't my patient, but I was her advocate, because soon after her arrival, I called the Attorney General's office just to be certain that her rights would be protected. It wasn't until 2007 that gender identity was added to the Iowa Civil Rights Act. So these were delicate times. She found her life there. She expressed it, comfortable in her own skin, developed relationships, recognized and honored by staff. It was a glorious season in her life, those 18 years. Of course, there were comments. She always took the high road, gracious, and touched a lot of our lives. In 2012, I'm leaving because I had served there as the director of mental health, which is kind of a unique setting for a Quaker pacifist. And as I'm getting ready to go, she's wanting to go on an honor flight. But she would only go if I would accompany her. So off we went in the April of 2024 to see the World War II Memorial in D.C. We spent at least over an hour there. We saw other sites in the day, but spent the majority of a couple of hours there. And towards the end of our time, we were off to the side and reflecting on, she's 97 now, by the way, and reflecting on her years of service. And along came Bruce Braley. Do you remember Bruce Braley? He was the U.S. representative to Congress from Northeast Iowa, Charlene's district. He begins to engage her and quickly realizes, my wife is the sponsor for the LGBTQ club at the Waterloo High School where she taught. And Charlene told her story. The trauma of war, the trauma of living as transgender. And he listened. It felt for a long time, but was probably 12 or 13 minutes. Knelt down by her side and listening. And when she was done, he thanked her for her service. He apologized for her treatment, and he admired her courage. Something in the way of healing took place. That validation by somebody representing the country that she loved. A few years later, I went back and spoke at her memorial service as she lived to be 102. So why this story? Well, tomorrow's Decoration Day, right? A day set aside after the Civil War when America lost 2/3 of our soldiers in that war. And in just over a month, gender identity as a civil right will be formally removed from the Iowa Civil Rights Act. We need stories. We need exemplars. I'm not sure if Charlene would want me to think of her as a hero or a saint, but she was a pioneer, and her story was powerful, and she shared it as frequently as she could with all the students and the interns and the residents that came through. But we need the stories to give us the courage that we need to live our lives faithfully in this day. In a response to the obituary, some friend out east discovered about a month later that Charlene had died. And she wrote, "Oh, Charlene, I just heard of your passing. Thank you for the stories you told me, and I will always carry them. You lived a remarkable life, amazing beyond belief and tragic beyond bearing." So I just want to close with the essence of that civil rights movement here in our country in the 1950s and the 1960s. And it makes me think of Charlene. None of us are free until all of us are free.